All right. Well, welcome to part 2 of our being proactive section here. Again, this is chapter 1 or habit 1. Sorry, not chapter 1 necessarily, but habit 1. Thanks to all who have been able to pop on and participate, and actually even reading with us. So I definitely appreciate everybody, Otto and Drew. Appreciate you guys, popping on here, and I feel like we have like this sort of mastermind each week that we're doing and helping maybe some people that are going to watch these videos on the far end here. So I definitely appreciate your guys' participation. But tonight, as I mentioned, last week we covered it was deep. I don't know if you guys really think that way too, but it was really deep on the first section of this being proactive. Again, he lays the foundation. Covey lays the foundation. For those of you who don't know, we're doing 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And we're just kind of taking this, just spooning it in. There's just so much content here, and we're just kind of going through it. We're probably never going to do it justice. It's definitely like a process to learn this. But I'm enjoying myself going through this book, and just really for the awareness, of just where I'm at and, kind of where I need to grow. And so, as I've said in the past, and kind of the tagline that I offer is, if you're not self-aware, you're unaware. This helps you. You have to be aware when you're going through this section on being proactive, because it's, as we talked about last week, it's reactive language versus proactive language. It's, are you going to let the stimulus, what's your response to the stimulus in the room? Or how are you going to let the surrounding atmosphere adjust how you're going to respond to things? And so I love what we talked about last week with some of the things. And one of the questions I asked, and maybe somebody that hasn't watched the replay yet will want to know this, but how do you flip the switch from reactive to proactive language? Honestly, I think it's just being very conscious of each conversation, being very conscious of each decision that we're making. And so tonight, just going through maybe the next couple pages here, next few sections here, and kind of pulling up some notes that I've had in the past from reading here. And we'll kind of go over it. But Drew, the last couple weeks here, and Otto, what are your guys' thoughts on what we've covered so far?
I mean, I liked it. Oh, yeah. Same. I feel I feel like I've benefited from diving into this more. You know what I mean? And it's been holding me accountable to research and study as well. So, but like I said, I kind of want to get into some of the further chapters in this book. But yeah, it's been good so far.
Good, Drew?
It's been very good so far. Last week's discussion, I would agree with you. It was very deep. And it helped me keep a track on my actions and stuff this week, which I needed. I felt like you guys were standing on my shoulders. A lot of or just looking over my shoulders, invading my privacy. I don't know. But, it was good. I actually apologized to somebody who I had needed to apologize to since high school, since junior year of high school, which would have been
15 years ago, dude. That's a long time ago.
Maybe even more.
Wow.
I don't even know how to do the math, but it was really good, and I think this going over that kind of gave me the courage I needed to do the right thing in that regard.
Yeah.
I've already been reaping some benefits from it.
Awesome. Well, that's great, and just thinking back to the first couple pages of the section, and I know Otto is looking forward to some of these next sections here. He's really looking forward to busting through, but I think there's couple more things through here that I'd really like to definitely hit on that I think will help us a lot. So in the next couple of pages here, and for those of you following along with us, we're in the page 80, somewhere around that now, 80, 81, 82, somewhere in those couple of sections here. And, I'm on actually page 84 here in my book, which is talking about stimulus. So what is a stimulus? What's happening to us? What's the stimulus in the area? And so if we define stimulus, that would be anything that invokes a reaction, right? Anything that, could either trigger us to do something or trigger us to make a decision, or a trigger point is what I kind of see as a stimulus. And I know in scientific research and in scientific things, there's obviously the stimulus and then the reaction to the stimulus. So, something causes something, or cause and effect in essence. So, I think that, some of the different pieces that we look at here, and one of the quotes I took out of the book was, proactive people's behavior is a product of their own conscious choice based on values rather than a product of their conditions based on feelings. Reactive people are often affected by their physical environment. So if we think about the environments that we play a role in, and I talk a lot about when I'm working with clients and I'm working with, everything that we have happen to us, the personality that we have typically is dictated by the environment around us. It's all very, very easy to predict how somebody's going to react when stress comes. Okay, so stress in this case could be the stimulus in our situation. And so when we have proactive mindset, we control our behavior. We control our thought processes. We control those things instead of being a reactive person, which when we're reactive, we're letting those things make us angry, letting those things around us really, conflict with what we're dealing with. And, perfect example, having children. You can either take charge of the day, or you can let your kids and just run and just make you be reactive completely. Even talking about just, in your employment, if you think about your job and what you do on a day-to-day, if you get behind, you typically start to play into that reactive piece, and you start to make reactive decisions instead of being, and then the environment around you, that if it's really kind of stressful and you don't really handle stress, you like more of a positive environment, well, then that stress can kind of really kick you into a whole nother mental, it just throws you into like a loop, throws you into like this, man, I'm just not with it today, and I feel like out of whack. And, so there's some other pieces here, that kind of tie into this, where Viktor Frankl, he was a person from the Holocaust, and he kind of went through the Holocaust, and he says, he was talking about his story with going through the Holocaust, and how he realized that the people that were in charge had no power over his mind, they could take him through every single piece, but they had no power over his mind. And I found that fascinating, that he decided, even through such a horrible existence at that time, that he was going to be proactive and say, you know what, you can take everything, including my life, but you'll never have me, my soul, and my mind. And, I think that's fascinating. And so, when you guys read that section, even just thinking about your day-to-day here, I know that I've had many cases, many days where I've been completely reactive, and then it kind of loops and then snowballs and loops and snowballs. So, I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Drew?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I feel like, sometimes I don't think of it in those terms, but I feel like getting down to what it is, that's what it is. Talking about looping and snowballing, like a lot of conflicts with my wife or other people could be avoided if I just, controlled my behavior a little bit more, said, this is not going to get the best of me if I had a bad day at work or whatever. Yeah.
Chris, what do you think?
I've often heard it said that, the path to success is never a straight line, dude. Like it's, you're going to have your tucks and rolls. Like, we're all human. We all mess up. We're not perfect, but you're exactly right. Like, how we control our thoughts during that is what's crucial. In fact, like, I had called Josh just before this, cause I'm going through something right now, you know what I mean? And like, it's all here. You know what I mean? Like, in the way that I'm perceiving what's going on around me, do you know what I mean? And like, hurts from the past, for example. And it's, hey, like, I can either let it get to me, or I can overcome those thoughts and, be more than conquerors, like the Bible says, you know what I'm saying? So it's how do I say this? It's okay to get a snowball or a curve. It's not okay to wallow there.
That's good.
Honestly, that's part of why I'm here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
right. And you're right. And the other thing, the ironic part of it is that you kind of get in that snowball, and then when you stay there, then everything then becomes harder and harder and harder.
You spin your wheels in the mud. What happens? Your wheels get stuck deeper. It's
Right.
not until you understand, hey, I'm stuck and I can't get out, and I surround myself with other people who are wise, and then we make an action plan to get out.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that kind of leads me into like our language. You know, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I met with a group of entrepreneurs, and the whole, you know, premise was obviously talking about hiring, but I actually felt kind of more along the lines of, hey, let's start with the foundation. The foundation is, what are you saying right now? Like, what are you saying to yourself? What are you saying to your team? And how do you speak versus how does your team speak? And the interesting thing is, as a CEO or as a president or as an owner of a company, you're going to have one set of language talking about, you know, growth and development and sales and, you know, revenue, versus your employee who's going to be thinking stability, security, vacation, right? They don't have your best interest in mind 90% of the time. Well, that could be changed by altering the language. So if you are all on the same page and there's a foundation of communication where everybody is realizing that, listen, I'm not going to be offended if you recognize how I actually communicate most effectively. And I think this all ties back into understanding who we are, under becoming self-aware, having that awareness of how we react in situations. Drew, I love your honesty when you said, you know, if I would have just simply taken more responsibility for how I reacted before I had that conversation with my wife, things would have been a whole lot better. And, you know, Frankl says, and I'm not quite sure exactly which page I wrote this down in. I think it's within here, like around the language side. But Viktor Frankl said 3 central values in life: experiential, that which happens to us; creative, that which we bring to existence; and attitudinal, our response in difficult circumstances. And I find it like that he sees it through those 3 things, right? Those 3 kind of perspectives. And we talked about perspective. We talked about, you know, in the first couple pages of this book about how when we have our perspective or our paradigm really affects our day-to-day. And so when we talk about experiential, that which happens to us, those of us that are reactive, let that be our main way of making our decisions, right? Then you have creative, that which we bring into existence, and then attitudinal, our response to difficult circumstances. So it's like, you know, the reactive language can be very, very evident if we're not balanced, and if we don't have, you know, some straightforward thinking, some really being proactive, you know, at the end of the day. So if we're not taking control of our language, if we're not taking control of our circumstances and our situations, and actually saying, you know what, I'm not going to react to how the day is going to go. I'm going to take control of my day. Chris and I were talking this week, and, you know, he mentioned something. I said, I just heard this, and what I heard was that it's not what happens to you, it happened for you. And what's key about that is that, you know, if you think about it in one perspective, which is it's happened to me, then you get defeated and reactive. But if it happens for you to grow, to learn, to develop, if you have that perspective, it happens for you, then you actually are being more proactive in that situation. Does that make sense?
No, I mean, like, you know, because that affects me directly. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. You know, you know, when you said that to me, like, it honestly framed how I was thinking about what I was personally going through. And hey, just to reveal what I'm personally going through, I'm really tossing up the idea of quitting my job and starting my own business. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm at. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But it's that overcoming the fear, you know what I mean, of jumping out into it. But that's exactly what, you know, just provide clarity on what Josh and I are talking about. That's where we're at. So I don't mind you.
That's a big life step. And it's a very potentially good life step.
Yeah, exactly. So, because, you know, right now, the position I'm at, I'm director of digital marketing strategy at an ad agency. And I'm over here, like, you know, like, I hate to say it, like, I'm taking orders. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, I feel like I can do this on my own. And now it's just, do I take that leap? You know? So.
What don't you, sorry, this is getting on a tangent, but, like, what don't you like about, like, just the taking orders? Like, how many people work at the company?
12. It's not just about taking orders. That's not 100% the right way to say it. You know, like, I've always tended to be like an autonomous person. Like, I hate to say it, like, I like being in charge. I like deciding things for myself. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain collisions that I have with the owner's philosophy on how to do things without revealing too much. You know what I mean? So like it's, you know, I think it comes down to also like dollars and cents. Like I look at what I'm billing versus what I'm earning. And I'm over here like, God bless, I could do this on my own and make 4 times as much. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I'm at. But it's scary to take that leap of faith because at the beginning, you know how it is starting a business. Hey, dude, it's going to be hard knock life for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I got kids. You know what I'm saying? So it's you balance. Where do you balance like this whole centered area? Eat my lunch, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Like, as we're getting into this, you know what I mean? Like
that's literally where I'm going to transition. And this one statement that I wanted to go into here right before that, and we can even just think about it and ponder on it, and then maybe kind of as we cover next week and kind of wrap this whole section up. But it's on page 87, and I actually highlighted it, started, and everything. A serious problem with reactive language is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People become reinforced in the paradigm that they are determined, and they produce evidence to support the belief. So the problem with reactive language, paraphrasing, is that you are what you believe. And if it's happening to you, you believe that it is the case, right? And so if we think about the definition of faith, it's a substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. So it really boils down to positive thinking. You know, I know there's power of positive thinking. There's books on that. But it comes down to reactive language is that, and even an example of that is, I can't, right? And we just looked at the page before, and it looks at reactive language. There's nothing I could do. Proactive language comparison to that would be, let's look at all our alternatives. And there's that little chart there. You know, but proactive people focus their efforts on their circle of influence. We're going to lead right into this. Thank you, Chris. Proactive people focus their efforts on their circle of influence. They work on the things they can do something about. Positive energy enlarges the circle of influence. So, you know, so when we think about that, we actually look at, you know, the fact that proactive language and proactivity and being proactive in our nature and what we're doing really kind of, it allows us to have a you know, this section here, guys, it completely changed my paradigm, as we talked about before, and I still daily struggle with it, honestly, like, because I still fight with things that I cannot control, and it's like, you know what, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do what I have direct control over, right, or not even indirect control or no control at all. Like, those kind of things frustrate me. Like, there's a couple big life situations that we're working on here ourselves, you know, and I'll be honest, you know, do we have another child? We would have 4, right? And that's a huge life circumstance. And no, we're not planning, but as I'm talking through it, we're talking about it and saying, okay, we have 3 now. Would that be, and so but right now,
bag it and tap it, dude.
Where's the mute button at on this thing? No, it's okay. But it's one of those things, it's one of those decisions where, man, like, that's really, we're kind of in a level of, is that something I can control or is it something that I can't control, you know?
Yeah.
And so, Drew, did you get through that section? I'm sure you did. You probably read this whole chapter too. But on circle of concern, circle of influence, what were your thoughts on that?
Actually, this was the part of the chapter where I started kind of losing it just a little bit. Okay. So I would just appreciate, I mean, I read it. The diagrams didn't kind of correlate on a one-to-one level with me.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want to talk about that, I am all ears.
Okay. And that may, you know what, it may help others too that are watching this. So that's totally cool. So, Chris, I mean, what did you think? Because you mentioned you were, you know, talking about the section. So what do you think? Did you really
I thought I was actually talking about the next chapter, dude.
Oh, okay. Next chapter. Okay.
Yeah,
so that's fine.
Sorry,
no, that's okay.
Yeah. What I was talking about was like the centeredness, the principles, like, you know, getting into habit 2. That's where I thought we were going today. So that's my bad. I did read this. I'm right with Drew though. Like, I totally read this. Like, I'm on board. This is, I feel the same exact way. This is where, like, I was starting to trail off also.
Okay. It's deep. Honest, guys. Anybody watching this or listening to it, it's deep. So circle of influence, circle of concern. Okay. So when you think on the one hand, the circle of influence is what you can control. You're almost essentially looking at the circle and the sphere as like two levels. Okay, so when you have the circle of influence, it's those things that you can direct. There we go. Thank you for pulling it up there. On our screen on the left-hand side, the circle of concern, that outer rim, is things that we're not directly in control of. Circle of influence, those are the things that we can be directly in control of. So it's in my job, on the day job side.
Give us some examples.
Yeah, doing insurance. Okay. My sales are tied directly to what I can influence. And what I mean by that is, if I don't make enough calls in a month, it's evident where you could see maybe the numbers aren't quite there. Versus and even that goes for our own businesses, right? In the event that, if my circle of influence is what can I manage and control. I can't control whether somebody's going to buy from me, but I could talk to 3-4 more people to let them know that, hey, this is what I do, right? That's my circle of influence. I can't control when Mrs. Johnson cancels her policy because she's angry that claims did something. So I recognize that the claims department is out of my control. I'm not a claims guy. I'm just in the agency working on my customers and servicing them the best that I can. The circle of concern, what often happens there, if we look here, reactive people, hang on a second here. So the circle of concern, that outer ring, is actually typically what we try as we're proactive, we push that and make that thinner, right? So we say, okay, this is what I can control. The circle of concern is not as important. Versus the second page, which is talking about reactive focus. So the reactive focus thinks about, I'm concerned with all these pieces, and really, on the scheme of things, I really don't have control over much. And that leads right into, and I'll kind of hit it with this, direct, indirect, and no control. The circle of concern is typically the indirect and no control over something, okay? Versus the circle of influence, which is you have direct control over what happens. If I call a few more people, I may get a few more sales. If I drive to work this way, realizing there's an accident, I can go around, and I can take direct control of that. If you're, Drew, if your position, and even Chris, you as well, in your positions at your employment, Drew, if you can make your plan of attack differently and have control over that. So now what you can't predict is if somebody comes in or your boss comes and said, hey, listen, scratch what you're doing. This is more important right now today. You cannot control that, but that's really not for you. The proactive language still has to be there. Chris, on your example, for maybe somebody in your field or in your market, you are an account manager. You're an account executive for these clients from top to bottom. You're dealing with everything in their process. But what you can't control is if they don't get you what they need, what you need from them at a deadline, it's not your fault. You know what I mean? So you have really no control over that. So what this is saying is that proactive focus, now we're taking from language to now focus. What we put ourselves into really boils down to, what do we have direct control over? My family. I have direct control over how my family goes to an extent. I cannot tell you how my kids are going to react to things. I cannot tell you how they're going to respond. And if I tell them, hey, I want your room cleaned before I get home, I actually don't have direct control over that at that time. My authority says, hey, I have control over the situation, but I really don't, because I'm not here to lead them in that spot, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Does that clear anything up?
Yeah.
Drew?
I wrote some of the terms down on some of the diagrams as you were talking. So yeah, it did.
Good. A little bit of water. That's what I'm here for, guys. That's what I'm here for.
Marco Rubio.
So reactive people, because again, we were talking about this whole section here. So two statements here. I'll reread the statement now that we have that clarification there. Proactive people focus their efforts on the circle of influence. They work on the things they can do something about. Positive energy enlarges the circle of influence. Okay? I'm proactive. That's positive energy going out there saying, man, we're going to enlarge it. I can actually control more in this situation. Reactive people focus their efforts in their circle of concern. They focus on the weakness of other people, the problems in their environment, and circumstances over which they have no control. Negative energy reduces their circle of influence. So it comes back to direct, indirect, or no control at all. Fascinating. It really is, like, it's mind-boggling, because when you think about it, one of the things that I teach my business owners to think about, or, insurance agents that are looking to hire, okay, you have a certain gifts and skill set, right? When you become self-aware, when you start on that journey of self-awareness, when you're starting to realize, man, okay, I feel like I'm good at these couple things, and you get some confirmation of that. And then you start to realize, man, some of my limitations, aka weaknesses, are, maybe I'm not as detail-oriented as I need to be. Maybe I don't handle criticism that well. Maybe I don't handle rejection that well, whatever the case may be. But when you start to realize that your weaknesses, your limitations, I tell my owners and the people that I work with to focus on their strengths and hire to the limitations. If I'm not a detail guy, it's going to take a lot of energy for me to get that skill set into reps, and I may be incrementally better. But if I double down on what I'm skilled at, which is relationship or communication or being in front of a camera, for goodness sakes, not a lot of people like it. But I love it. Blogging, writing, teaching. Chris is not good in front of a camera, apparently. He doesn't know how to do it. But if I look at that and I double down on my strengths and I say, man, I'm gonna focus hardcore on this. And we even talked about this with Chris. He was saying, okay, let's talk about my business. What am I good at, and what do you see that I'm good at? I said, look, you are good at sales. You're good at this. You're good at communicating and articulating the vision of somebody, what they're looking for. But I said, what do you find that takes a lot of energy? And he said, maybe doing the day-to-day of like the website or scheduling, right? So then he would hire somebody to handle the details while he does what he's best at, which is finding, networking, competing, grouping, that kind of thing.
Well, that's like my biggest takeaway too. Like, from how I did things differently, because Drew, just to give you context, like, hey, I used to be self-employed, freelance for 12 years before I started working for some other people for the last 4 years now. And, like, I've learned a lot, you know what I mean? Like, having a team around me, I really like it a lot better. You know what I mean? And Josh is absolutely right. Like, I would farm out things that I don't like and focus on the stuff that I do like. So.
Now, not all of us, like Drew, you're employed. So you necessarily, unless you're managing a team, you necessarily can't delegate your limitations. You may still have to do part of your job, may still be doing some of those things you don't like unless you're at a position maybe higher than you. Or you may be getting things that you're good at and they've recognized, hey, Drew is really good at this and it's in your skill set, but then it's really something that they don't want to do. But if you're in leadership, you actually have the power to make that happen, So in definition of this direct, indirect, and no control, I really, kind of going back to circle of influence, circle of concern, it's going to be a daily thing for us to realize, man, is this something that, and the question you literally, if you want to write this down, anybody watching this or listening to this, or even podcast, whatever, if you just listen to this, circle of influence, what do I have direct control over? Okay, so direct control, it's solved by working on habits within our circle of influence, which we're going to lead right into this private victories, which is habits 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So solved by working on our habits within our own circle of influence. So the direct control is when we can make the decisions that portray or lead into this. Indirect is solved by changing our methods of influence. This is going to be talking about habits 4, 5, and 6, public victories, habits 4, 5, and 6. Okay. And then no control is, you right there, Jim?
Yeah, my cat just literally jumped 8 feet onto a ledge.
That's awesome. And then, oh wow, all the way up there. That's awesome. Yeah. And then no control is problems we can do absolutely nothing about. And I find, when you're in maybe a stressful environment, we tend to lean towards our limitations more. And those kind of in a stressful environment, whatever takes a lot of our energy. And so I think that if we really kind of look at this and think about it, okay, what can I influence today? What do I have direct control over today in my life? What do I have direct control over? And then, when we think about that, it really then changes our paradigm and adjusts our language, and it then makes us look and see things with a different eye towards growth, towards change, towards self-improvement, self-development, and those kind of things. So the circle of concern is filled with haves. There's haves and bees, okay? So the haves are those people that, which actually, let me get to that section here. the circle of concern is filled with the haves. I'll be happy when I have my house paid off. If only I had a boss who wasn't such a dictator. If only I had a more patient husband or wife. If I had only had more obedient kids. The circle of influence is filled with the B's. So circle of concern is those negative or reactive languages, right? But the circle of influence is filled with the B's. I can be more patient. I can be more wise, be more loving. It's the character focus. So that is just, man, like something to really take a couple days to chew on and just think about. Man, just like, again, I find the most interesting thing about these first couple sections to me is that it's really training me to listen to what I say.
Yeah.
I told my kids this, like after we talked a couple weeks ago, I said, you can't do that or you choose not to. I literally put that into place. And I think to myself, I can't make 100 calls today, or I'm scared of the rejection of no, and so I don't want to. And so every day, go ahead.
The one takeaway that I took from this area, the haves and the bees, is, A, where are you finding your happiness in? Where are you finding your not self-esteem, self-centered? Where are you finding your self-identity? You know what I mean? The core of who you are. Is it in other things that are around you, or is it in who you are? And honestly, hey, Christ Jesus, because spiritual side of things. Mm-hmm. But, you know what I mean? Like, when you read through all of this, I'll be happy when I have my house paid off. I'd be happy if I had a boss who wasn't such a dictator, if I had more patient husband, if I had more obedient kids. These are all external things. Do you know what I mean? And I find, like, I've personally found a lot of people in life who are unhappy because of external things, and they're not focusing on the internal side of things. So,
which is the reactive language then is the responses to the environment. Like we react to the environment, and it's easy to really predict those kind of things. It really is. No, and thank you for that, Chris. The proactive approach is to change from the inside out, just as you mentioned, to be different and be different, and by being different, to affect positive change in what's out there. I can be more resourceful. I can be more diligent. I can be more creative. I can be more cooperative. So I don't know if you guys want to make this like almost like your daily motto, but for me, I'm going to start implementing this because, again, as I read through this, it's like, man, okay, yeah, I need to change that. This isn't becoming overwhelming for me because I understand it's baby steps. It really is. It's just like, it's bite-sized chunks that I can say, okay, pay attention to your language. Pay attention to how you're saying things. And then it's just creating that new habit. And as we talked about, it's around 66, 70 days of changing your language. You change your language, you change your business. Or you change your language, you change your family. Change your language, you change your relationship. If you change your language, you change your thoughts. And if you change your thoughts, you change yourself. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you change who you are, which you can only directly, you have every bit of you is your own circle of influence. So by just reading this book, you're already steps ahead of everybody else because you are literally taking the steps to make sure your life is changing. The proactive approach, again, is to change from the inside out, to be different. I can have more resources. I can be more cooperative. I can do what I need to do. And I find, like, as we close out this section, and he talks about here and like doing like the 30-day test, but I find like, I may read this section over again just because there's so much to take away from here. And we are going to move on to Habit 2 next week, which we'll read that for next week. But, I would love to, if you guys have any thoughts this week, throw them up in the group and just, ask a question. I'll respond. I'll share it. And then I think this week, because this is so deep, I think this week we'll open up the group to like public. I'll just start pushing out there saying, hey, anybody else is welcome, wants to watch these, and kind of go from there. But, I think that if we start to really kind of wrapping this up here tonight, I think if we really, again, we have a couple things to think about. Our paradigm. How are we looking at things? Okay. Our language. How are we saying things? And if we think about our, being proactive, it boils down to, what is our circle of influence? So how are we seeing things? So you have, how are you thinking about things? How are you saying things? And ultimately, how are you thinking about things? So, it really, or I'm sorry, not how you think about things. How are you letting things around you, and how are you, moving through those things with the circle of influence? So I think there's a lot to take away from this, obviously, and this will be lifetime worth of change. But yeah. So any closing remarks from either of you?
If we're gonna wrap up this chapter, the only other like sub note that I have on there is like in the making and keeping commitments area, page 99. I wrote down, and I've heard this before: people with good intention make promises, but people with good character keep them.
That's good. Yeah. Drew?
One thing that stuck out to me in the chapter was like 2 ways to put ourselves in control of our lives immediately. And that was to make a promise and keep it. That's also one thing I was working on this past week. One thing I want to keep on working on is making promises, keeping them. The second thing was setting a goal and working to achieve it. I have this stupid poem behind me. I forget what it's even called. It's like the guy under the spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands, right? But there's a line in there that says, something attempted, something done. And like, that's the way the guy goes to sleep every night. It's like, I attempted something, I did something, I'm a rich man.
That's good. And then again, it boils down to taking control of your situation, right? Or what you can. And I think that's the hardest thing is, in each of our situations, we all have day-to-day things that we really aren't, like, oh gosh, I really don't want to do that. But, is it going to help affect the next day, right? So if I don't wrap up my day by looking at the next day's activities and saying, okay, tomorrow I need to call Miss Jones, Mr. Thomas, and Miss Fredrickson, okay? Because they're looking, they said follow up with them in a couple days. Well, if I don't take control of my circumstance and look through that, then, I may not have, as you said, Drew, I don't have a way to check off that day. You know what I mean? So that's pretty interesting. I like that. So, well, guys, thank you so much. And for those of you guys that are going to be watching this recording or listening to it, thank you guys for participating and listening along with us. I will have the recording now that I have both of them. I'll have them up here probably the next day or so. And so for next week, we will be covering habit number 2, which is principles of personal leadership. And it's the second habit underneath that private victory. So as you can see, is we're working on private, and then we're going to go to public, and then we're going to, kind of take care of everything as a whole. So thanks, guys, for participating tonight. Appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.